Currently, the International Association of Privacy Professionals doesn't have a textbook. Hello and welcome back to Privacy Professional Training. I'm Fumi, and today's video we're going to be talking about the AIGP exam and how I passed it at the first instance. So if that's of interest to you, keep on watching. So I think this is the video that I'm most excited about because currently the International Association of Privacy Professionals doesn't have a textbook to study for this exam for. So the exam is relatively new, it's under 2 years old. So the resources that the IAPP has is the body of knowledge, a glossary, and they also have 50 questions that you can practice from, but they don't have a textbook. And if you've been here for a while, you know that I traditionally use the textbook as my starting point when I'm studying for any test. So I had to improvise, and that's why I'm very excited about this video, because what it demonstrates is you can pass any test, one, if you put your mind to it, and two, if you're resourceful. I'm going to leave a link to all of the resources that I personally use to pass the test. If I'm able to find a screenshot of my passing paper, I'm going to insert it into this video. But I did pass the exam at the first instance, and let me tell you about my studying. So I started thinking about taking the AIGP exam, which is the Artificial Intelligence Governance Professional. That's what the acronym stands for. So I started thinking about taking the exam in December of 2024. And then I started to look and do a little bit of research online. At this point, I didn't know when I was going to take the test, but I knew that it was instrumental for improving and broadening my knowledge on artificial intelligence, because a lot of the clients I was working with were implementing or starting to think about implementing AI into their current systems and processes. In order for me to be able to understand the products that they're using and understand the language associated with artificial intelligence, I knew that it was an exam that I needed to take. So as I started to look online, I found out that there was no textbook. So then I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to study for this test? Traditionally, for every other test I've taken, I have had a textbook. So what I did was I went on Amazon and I started to look at books that were being offered by other privacy professionals. And I did find a couple of resources. Now, one of them I didn't end up buying. One of them I did end up buying. And I will say that there were some concepts in there that I thought were very useful, but I ended up taking a course. So I found a course by another privacy professional. I will link it below. And what I did is, because I had no textbook, I looked at the body of knowledge and I looked at the recommended resources by the IAPP. So even when there's no textbook, the IAPP will give you a list of resources, maybe like 3 or 4, and they'll be like, you should concentrate or supplement your studies with these resources. So I found those resources and I downloaded them and I saved them onto my computer as PDFs. And then the second thing I did was I purchased the course. Now the course itself is about 20 hours long. And what I did for this particular test, which is really good, is I would listen to the course throughout my workday. As opposed to the waking up at 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. to read a textbook, what I did for the AIGP exam was 6 hours of my day, or depending on when I had meetings or client discussions, etc., I would listen to this course that I had purchased. And I did that for 3 months. Now, I felt very nervous going into the test. However, I knew that I had listened to enough course materials and I had found enough questions and utilized the resources that the IAPP had mentioned on their website to ensure that I felt ready for the test. Now, the course that I purchased had about 200 questions. Then the IAPP also offered 50, so I did buy those questions. And I didn't start taking any questions until 2 months into my study. And I've talked about this in other videos, but generally I will spend my weekends doing the questions and then during the week I'll read the textbook. But because there was no textbook, I didn't feel comfortable starting any of the questions until I had listened to the course over and over. So you can imagine the course is 20 hours and I'm dedicating between 5 and 6 hours of my workday listening to it in the background. Now, this was not active listening. I didn't make any notes. And I didn't start making any notes until the 3rd month. The first 2 months, it was just listening to it over and over. And there are skills that you acquire when you're listening to something over and over again. You actually start to learn some of that information. Now, I'm not traditionally an auditory learner. I'm traditionally a kinesthetic learner. So this was quite an interesting way for me to study for the test. But what it shows is you can pass the exam too. Now, as of the recording of this video, there still is no textbook for the AIGP exam, which is why I felt that it was really a good idea to share how I was able to pass the exam. And I will say that having people on Facebook that had taken the exam before me was also very useful. Now, I have something to add. I took the exam in March 2025, and just a month prior, the AIGP exam had changed. So some people had taken the exam January 2025 and February 2025 using the old materials, and then the body of knowledge changed in February. So I was studying for the new iteration of the body of knowledge with brand new concepts. It was quite a challenge, one, to grapple with the materials for the new body of knowledge, and two, to be able to put together resources, because if you've watched my videos, you know I generally have like between 6 or 7 resources at a minimum before I take any test. But for this test, I only had the questions that were offered by IAPP, the course that I had paid for, and then I also purchased additional questions on Amazon, which I'll link below. So between the three of them, I spent a lot of time listening. Now, the other really good thing about the course that I took is they did have PowerPoint slides, which I did review, because obviously when you're listening to a course over and over, there will be concepts that you will miss. So be very careful about making sure that you're also reviewing the course materials that are provided outside of just listening to a lecturer provide you insight into the key AIGP concepts. Now, something else I wanted to talk about in this video is the AIGP is unique in that it's not exclusive to privacy, right? Artificial intelligence and privacy, they do have overlaps, just like security and privacy have overlaps, but they're not the same thing. And some of the concepts in the AIGP look at other areas of the law, like strict liability. That's a concept that came up. Obviously, I've studied and understand what strict liability is because I am a practicing lawyer, but there were other concepts that I felt were very unique and were more technical, and maybe somebody that works exclusively in the security team would understand. So be very careful with the concepts, because there are concepts from all different facets of different business parts. There are legal concepts, there are security concepts, there are concepts that are specific to artificial intelligence, and you need to know them for the test. I think I talked about the fact that I didn't start reviewing the PowerPoint slides and making my outline until 1 month before I took the test. So for the first 2 months, all of January, all of February, I just listened to the course. And I did take the questions that I'd purchased on Amazon, but I didn't take the IAPP questions because I didn't feel ready enough to see what my score might be so early on. Now, for the privacy exams, I'm far more confident. I take the questions pretty much the week that I start reading. But for AI, it's a very brand new space. And so if you are a privacy professional or you're an aspiring privacy professional, take care to spend enough time on the test. Now, I can't tell you how long you should spend on the test, but if you look at how long I spent listening to the courses, you'll understand how I was able to pass it at the first instance. I'm pretty sure I listened to that course through probably 4 or 5 times. That's how many times I listened to it, because I didn't have a textbook to leverage and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't having to repeat the exam. I would take a look at the body of knowledge over and over to be able to compare whatever resources that you are reviewing against the concepts you're going to be tested on. That's also really very important. And do your own research and utilize and leverage Quizlet. That was the other resource that I used. So there have been other privacy professionals or students who have taken the AIGP exam and they've created flashcards. So when I was doing my daily walks, I would review the flashcards. Now, I wasn't trying to memorize each concept. If I didn't understand it, I would just flip over to it on Quizlet and review it again. And I'm pretty sure that there is a specific Quizlet group that has 487 flashcards. I'm going to leave it in the description below. It was excellent. It was really very good. And I feel like it explained all of the concepts that I needed, in addition to the course I was taking, in addition to the PowerPoint presentation. In terms of booking the exam, I booked it at the beginning of March. I knew I was going to take it end of March. And then that's when I really took the IAPP questions, the 50 questions, which were good. And I found the IAPP questions to be relatively simpler than the course that I had been studying. The course that I used was quite intense. It covered everything. It was really fantastic. And if you're a student, you're studying for the AIGP exam and you're looking for additional questions, I've actually created some questions, 300 unofficial practice questions. If you would like to leverage those to help you with your studies, I'll leave that below. So I created an outline on concepts I didn't know. And the concepts that I really wasn't secure on were the concepts specific to artificial intelligence and the concepts specific to security, technical concepts like that. So that's really what I made the outline of. The privacy matters, I've done a number of these exams, so I didn't write down any of the privacy concepts, but there is a component of the exam that does test you on privacy, and you really need to be able to understand the EU AI Act. You need to be able to read that. Now, it's a very long act. You don't need to read the whole thing, but if you can find resources online that provide you summaries, that would be really useful for you, because the obligations that a entity has, depending on how they utilize artificial intelligence, are going to be crucial for you to be able to understand for the exam. And in addition to that, you should take a look at the artificial intelligence legislation that's coming out of the United States, because the AIGP exam doesn't just focus on one jurisdiction. It looks at AI and how it is affecting companies globally. So that's the other difference, right? When you take the CIPP US exam, it focuses almost exclusively on the United States. Same with the CIPPE exam, it focuses on Europe and privacy in Europe. But the AIGP looks at AI globally. So you need to be doing a lot of your own research if you're going to be passing the exam in 2025. Now, I don't know if in 2026 the IAPP is going to be releasing a textbook. If they release a textbook, I will come on to this channel and we can talk through it. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this type of content or you are looking to sit for any of the privacy exams, subscribe to this channel and I'll see you in another video.